Welcome back to Palestine Bookshelf. I'm Stephen Heiner, and today we're going to be discussing The Question of Palestine by Edward Said. This edition had an introduction added to it in 1992. The book was originally published in 1979, and obviously the Palestinian question was in some ways very different in 1979, and in some ways it's the exact same question as we find in 2025. I originally did a two-part review for this book on my main Stephen Heiner channel. I was happy with those reviews. I'll put links to them in the description, as well as I'll put a couple cards up. So I'm not going to try to duplicate that review. I'm going to do an express version of those reviews simply by reading some of the quotes that still resonate with me. Some of them I mentioned in the early review, some of them I didn't. But underline the point of the book, the position of the book, what is the question of Palestine? What are the things that we have to consider when we're looking at the issue? Israel itself, as well as its supporters, has tried to efface the Palestinian in words and actions because the Jewish state, in many, but not all ways, is built on negation of Palestine and the Palestinians. Until today, it is a striking fact that merely to mention the Palestinians, or Palestine and Israel, or to a convinced Zionist, is to name the unnameable. So powerfully does our bare existence serve to accuse Israel of what it did to us. Palestinians' existence is itself an accusation. I think that's a powerful point. They make up the question of Palestine, and if there is no country called Palestine, it is not because there are no Palestinians. There are, and this essay is an attempt to put their reality before the reader. So this is a classic low-hanging fruit Zionist objection. Where is there a country called Palestine? How could there be Palestinians if there was no country called Palestine? Thinking of the reverse order, that having a nation state, which is very new in world history, that is what creates a people. But that's not true. A people exist, and maybe from that a nation state will exist. But just because a nation state doesn't exist doesn't mean that those people don't exist, and doesn't mean that they could not aspire to such an existence. An example of that would be the Kurds. The Kurds exist in a number of different modern nation states, but they don't have their own political entity. Does that mean that there's no such thing as Kurds? Or the Basques, for example, in northern Spain and southern France. They have a language, a recognized different culture, food, language, but they exist within those nation states. But that doesn't mean that they're not their own people. So sometimes people live within modern nation states. Sometimes they have interesting existence. For example, Wales, a country I love very much, has their own language, their own music, their own culture, but they've been part of a political union with England and then later on the United Kingdom for so long that there's also a lot of connections with that other country that's next to them. So, for example, a lot of people even forget that there's such a place as Wales. But if you understand what Dr. Said is saying here, if there is no country called Palestine, it is not because there are no Palestinians. And interestingly enough, perhaps nothing has so solidified the Palestinian identity as the Nakba and the occupation. If Palestinians did not have a well-developed sense of who they were prior to 1948, it's only been deeply developed as a result of that. Here he's quoting Moshe Dayan in April 1969. "We came to this country, which was already populated by Arabs, and we are establishing a Hebrew, that is a Jewish state here. In considerable areas of the country, the total area was about 6%, we bought the land from the Arabs. Jewish villages were built in the place of Arab villages. You do not even know the names of these Arab villages, and I do not blame you, because these geography books no longer exist. Not only do the books not exist, the Arab villages are not there either. Nahalal, Dayan's own village, arose in the place of Mahalul, Givat, in the place of Jibta, Sarid, in the place of Hanifs, and Kefar Yehoshua, in the place of Tel Shaman. There is not one place built in this country that did not have a former Arab population." Remember, it was a land without people for a people without land, except when you hear someone say something like this and admit, no, we had to displace a bunch of people from here. Well, what do you call that? Well, ethnic cleansing. Here he poses a number of objections, which when I read them, I laugh because if he was writing this in 1979, these are the things we still hear. The Hasbara has lasted for so long. We are told that the Palestinians were in exchange for the Jews who left the Arab countries to come to Israel, that they left in spite of Haganah urgings that they not leave, that those who stayed are better off than their brethren in surrounding Arab countries, that there is only one haven for Jews and there are 20-odd for Arabs, and why can't Arabs be like Jews and take in their own refugees, that the occupation of more Palestinian territory in 1967 produced, in fact, a binational existence between Arab and Jew, that the West Bank occupation is a fulfillment of biblical prophecies, that there is a Palestine, and that is in Transjordan, that other refugees from Muslim India, from Nazi Germany, have resettled elsewhere, and why don't the Palestinians understand this, that the Palestinians are simply a political pawn used by the Arab regimes, and therefore do not really pose a problem once those regimes are made to see that they cannot get away with such tactics indefinitely. All of this, of course, simply moves around the issue, which seems to have been converted into powerful evidence for Zionism's morality and high standards of conduct. Here he's quoting Joseph Weitz from My Diary and Letters to the Children. This entry is from December 19th, 1940. After the Second World War, the question of the land of Israel and the question of the Jews would be raised beyond the framework of development amongst ourselves. It must be clear that there is no room for both peoples in this country. No development will bring us closer to our aim, to be an independent people in this small country. If the Arabs leave the country, it will be broad and wide open for us. And if the Arabs stay, the country will remain narrow and miserable. When the war is over and the English have won, and when the judges sit on the throne of law, our people must bring their petitions and their claim before them, and the only solution is Eretz Israel, or at least Western Eretz Israel, without Arabs. There is no room for compromise on this point. The Zionist enterprise so far, in terms of preparing the ground and paving the way for the creation of the Hebrew state in the land of Israel, has been fine and good in its own time, and could do with land buying. But this will not bring about the state of Israel. That must come all at once, in the manner of a salvation. This is the secret of the Messianic idea. And there is no way besides transferring the Arabs from here to the neighboring countries, to transfer them all, except maybe for Bethlehem, Nazareth, and Old Jerusalem. We must not leave a single village, not a single tribe. And the transfer must be directed to Iraq, to Syria, and even to Transjordan. For that purpose we'll find money, and a lot of money. And only with such a transfer will the country be able to absorb millions of our brothers, and the Jewish question shall be solved once and for all. There is no other way out. So you see, when you've read texts like these, when you've read Moshe Dayan saying, we took the land, when you read Joseph Weitz saying, we have to get rid of the Arabs, Benny Morris saying there was no explicit order given in 1947 or 48 shows itself to be absurd. You don't need to have an order when this is the line of thinking that's happening among the most influential people, when that's happening among your officers, when it's happening among your soldiers. If they're reading this and thinking this way, they don't need to be given an order. They just act. And that is what happened in 1948. If you are appreciating this content, can't say that you might like hearing it, but if you're appreciating it, please consider hitting like, subscribe. It's a great way to support the channel for free, and it gets this content out to other people who might appreciate it. Here is a description of Upper Nazareth as a project in 1975. Upper Nazareth, which was created some 15 years ago in order to create a counterweight to the Arab Nazareth, constitutes a corner of the Judaization of the Galilee policy. Upper Nazareth was erected upon the hills surrounding Nazareth as a security belt surrounding it almost on all sides. It was built upon thousands of acres of lands which were expropriated high-handedly, purely and simply by force, from the Arab settlements, particularly Nazareth and Rana. The very choice of the name Upper Nazareth, while the stress is upon upper, is an indicator of the attitude of the authorities. which give the new town special privileges according to their policy of discrimination and lack of attention regarding the city of Nazareth, which is, in their eyes, at the very bottom of the ladder. The visitor to Nazareth can acknowledge with his own eyes the neglect and lack of development of the city. And if from there he goes up to Upper Nazareth, he will see over there the new buildings, the wide streets, the public lights, the steps, the many-storied buildings, the industrial and artisan enterprises, and he will be able to perceive the contrast. Development up there and lack of care down there, constant government building up there, and no construction whatsoever down there. Since 1966, the Israeli Ministry of Housing has not built a single unit of habitation in Old Nazareth. So this was written in 1975, referenced in 1966, so it had already been 9 years, not a single extra building made. And this is apartheid. This is apartheid being described in 1975. So while it may more recently be called apartheid, and you might see this more of a movement as we talk about BDS, this has been happening for a long time in Palestine. And it's admitted, this was in Haaretz. No, it wasn't in Haaretz. It was in Zoharare. So this is all written down. Dr. Said didn't have to look very far to find all these sources. And he didn't have the internet in 1979 when he was writing this. It's all available. And that's the thing is, Zionists are counting on people not doing the reading. So that's why I'm passionate about Palestine Bookshelf, is because we're doing the reading and we're trying to get that out to you, and then you can do the reading yourself. Each Palestinian community must struggle to maintain its identity on at least two levels. First, as Palestinian with regard to the historic encounter with Zionism and the precipitous loss of a homeland. Second, as Palestinian in the existential setting of day-to-day life, responding to the pressure in a state of residence. Every Palestinian has no state as a Palestinian, even though he is of, without belonging to, a state in which at present he resides. There are Lebanese Palestinians and American Palestinians, just as there are Jordanian, Syrian, and West Bank Palestinians. Their numbers increase proportionally higher than those of Israeli Jews or other Arabs, as if the multiplication of complications extends even into the multiplication of bodies. Palestinian children today are born in such places as New York or Amman. They still identify themselves as being from Shaf Amr or Jerusalem or Tiberias. And that's because they're still striving to maintain their identity, even in the stasis and the situation they're in. It's admirable, beautiful, interesting in so many ways. Inside Israel, the Arab has traditionally been regarded as somebody to be prevented from ever acquiring a national consciousness. When Menachem Begin met the press, he was never asked how it was that he was elected on a platform promising to annex the West Bank as well as the East Bank, or how he squared his moral zeal about Zionism with the destruction of Palestinian society. But when Yasser Arafat appeared, the press always asked him about driving Jews into the sea, about recognizing Israel, about the PLO covenant, without even a hint that he and the Palestinians he represented were in fact being attacked daily by a state dedicated to Palestinian annihilation. And that's the question, the counter question I've learned to ask all the time when someone says, do I recognize the right of Israel to exist? You ask, do you recognize the right of Palestinians to exist? It's a non-starter, because the only way that Israel can exist in the way that they think of it is that Palestinians don't. And to build on this, as Francesca Albanese has said, no countries exist, but Noam Chomsky points out, no country has a right to exist. Countries come and go. They have over history. So countries exist. Whether or not they have a right to, we'll see how that goes over time. But I would agree with Noam Chomsky that no country has a right to exist. And here he's reflecting in the aftermath of Camp David in the late 70s, and what he's saying here could be said about any negotiation since then, through Oslo and beyond. One distinguished Palestinian writer described it, what autonomy in Camp David means. A fraction of the Palestinian people, under 1/3 of the whole, is promised a fraction of its rights, not including the national right to self-determination and statehood, in a fraction of its homeland, less than 1/5 of the area of the whole. And this promise is to be fulfilled several years from now, through a step-by-step process in which Israel is to exercise a decisive veto power over any agreement. Beyond that, the vast majority of Palestinians is condemned to permanent loss of its Palestinian national identity, to permanent exile and statelessness, to permanent separation from one another and from Palestine, to a life without national hope or meaning. So you might think, written in 1979, not really substantially revised in 1992. I think it recently came out in a new edition, probably with a bunch of wonderful essays, probably by some of Dr. Said's children. But it's timeless in many ways, and written by a Palestinian, it has even more resonance to it, perhaps never more necessary than today, reminding you that years may pass, but the question of Palestine remains the same. And the questions that Dr. Said was asking in 1979 are the questions we're still asking in 2025. So if you want to get a copy of this book, read it for yourself. There's a link in the description. That's one of the ways that you can support this channel. A free and easy way you can support this channel: hit like, subscribe, share this with people who might be interested in learning more about Palestine and learning the real story as opposed to what they're being told by the media. If you'd like to thank me for this presentation, there's links to buy me a coffee and PayPal below. If you want to support my work on an ongoing basis, consider Patreon or YouTube membership. There are also links below. You've got early access to videos like this one. You'll have a chance to chat with me behind the scenes. And you'll also have a chance to get access to videos that I don't release to the general public. If you'd like to nominate a book on Palestine for the future, go to my Amazon wishlist below. You'll see all sorts of different books, including books not at all related to Palestine. They're from my main Stephen Heiner channel. Feel free to go over and check that out if you'd like. But obviously, if you want to buy a book on the Palestinian issue, you can buy it, send it my way, and I will do my best to review it in a timely manner. And that way you can sponsor the video for a very low cost, just the cost of a book. At the very bottom, you'll also see a link to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. When this channel gets monetized, and the way that you can help the channel get monetized is to keep watching as many videos as you can, and we can accrue watch hours. When the channel gets monetized, we're going to donate 100% of the profits to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. It's a medical charity that helps Palestinian children get the care they couldn't otherwise get. They do wonderful work. Please visit the link, support them directly, or support them indirectly by supporting our channel. As always, until next time, enjoy your reading.